So we're here to discuss a new concept that we're looking at introducing to GitLab called group releases. Um, Given that there's no code or a repository at the group, we're wanting to validate and think through this workflow and consider different ways that people would interact with an aggregated releases concept at the group level. So we're hoping to pick your brain about some prototypes that Hayana has. And I'll pass it over to her.
Awesome. So Marin, you know the drill. I'm going to share with you a prototype on Figma and have a bunch of questions on it. So if you can answer out loud and tell us, in all honesty, what you think of the workflow, that would be awesome. So I sent you here in the chat. So if you can share your screen.
You need to sign up for this. I forgot.
No, you shouldn't.
No?
You shouldn't need. But if you do, okay, cool. And then there's a play button all the way on top right. Yeah, if you click that, you go in full screen, hopefully. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. You should see. Oh, hold on.
Didn't do anything.
No, it's loading. It's a bit odd, yeah. But okay. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit of what you see in this view? If you notice anything different, new, improved?
The only thing I'm seeing here is this addition to releases, like the releases overview, I guess. It's, yeah, classic group organization here. So the only thing I see is different this.
And what do you expect to happen if you click on this menu item?
I would expect to see a collection of most recent releases for each and every one of the projects inside of this structure. So I would expect to see vulnerability research latest release, language tools or latest release, manage, OpenShift, and so on and so on. I know that this is a subgroup, but that's why I'm stating it as well, because if language tools has multiple projects, I would expect those projects to roll up to this group and the summary of it to end up in the releases page.
You can go ahead and click the menu, and then if you can tell us what you see there.
Well, there's not much to see because there is only getting started. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Actually, something is odd here. Is this because of a prototype most likely? I'm missing the links on the site here. So it could be just a prototype. So I'm a bit surprised that I went here and I'm still rolled up to the group overview rather than the releases.
Okay. So you expect to see the where you are in the menu?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is the prototype. That was me. Yeah. What is, if anything, is missing here in this view? What else can you tell us about this page?
Well, what I find a bit odd about this page right now is if releases on the group level are supposed to be a collection of releases, I find it a bit odd that it's telling me getting started with releases on this level. What I would kind of expect to see here is, I already know I'm at the group level. Why would you expect me to think of the releases the same way I would think of it, at the project level? What I would prefer, or what I would expect to see here more is either similar structured tree, like we saw earlier with groups, subgroups, and so on, stating no releases or number of releases, or just like a general overview. even if that general overview just says this structure has no releases.
Mm-hmm. I gotcha.
Because like, I'm trying to think like, would I be creating a release from this group page? I probably wouldn't. I would probably go down to the levels where the projects are, where the actual code is, to create a release. If this is an overview, I would expect that link between.
Mm-hmm. Would you say then that you wouldn't like be creating a release at the group level? And if that's the case, what do you think you would be looking at?
There are two angles here, right? Like depends on the complexity of things. Like if I think about, let me use an example. Let's use the example of our GitLab-com group, right? In there, you have a collection of projects that are not strictly related to each other. I wouldn't be creating a release on the top level group because the logic states in that type of group that I would go down to the subgroup level where there is a better collection of similar projects, or on the project level and create it there. But if I think about a group structure like we have in GitLab-org, where we have a collection of projects that are very much related to each other, I would probably think about being able to not go to each an individual project and create a release on each individual one. I would like to do it on one level. So this is where you have a tough problem. We use groups and subgroups, not only to group projects, but to group workflows, to group like multiple different things. So you have to think, in my view, about both of those types of workflows.
Jack, as you're shaking your head, do you want to add something before I continue?
It was more like I think you nailed why this empty state looks the way it does today, is because we're wanting it to be flexible for users who have like a microservices structure where they really do have one application that populates from a series of subgroups and groups and wanting to bucket those things. But you're totally right that we need this empty state to also be intuitive for those who would be interested in creating maybe a cherry-picked version of where there's different projects across different kinds of subgroups. So that's perfect. Really great feedback there.
So Marin, what do you expect to happen when you click the, I cannot see exactly from your screen, but there's a button to create a new release, the green button there.
I actually don't see it. Oh, it's over there. I see it now. Oh,
bad UX.
Okay, well, I didn't even see the button, so. Oh, sorry, I already clicked on it. Well, I guess I would expect, well, this is a bit odd. I wouldn't expect this, I'll tell you that much. I wouldn't expect, like I would possibly expect a single release title because I'm assuming that the release title is just a human understandable format of a release rather than something that will be tied to the Git repository of a project. There is maybe like one use case where I would use the same title for multiple projects. But I would still expect to have some flexibility on what those projects, like what kind of tags do we create or we connect to a certain release. Let me explain a bit different. If I were to create, let's say GitLab releases. If I were to create a GitLab release for the 22nd of August, 2020, I would probably name this 22nd of August release or something like that. So that's a human understandable context and concept. I would probably select multiple projects and allow and want to, when I select a project, to have a way to tie for each individual project the tag that will be part of a release.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason why I would like milestones or use milestones across those different projects is if I had the possibility of collecting those milestones and them auto-populating parts of the release notes.
Gotcha.
The reason why I wouldn't be using milestones would be because different projects, even though they might be rolling up to general group milestone, if they have their own project milestone, right? Like that would be really confusing really fast.
That's interesting that you say it's confusing. I'm excited to hear your next steps as we dive into this prototype more.
Oh my God. Am I again being the one that is completely opposite from everyone?
No, not at
I'm
all.
sorry.
I feel like you're the fourth interview that I've done on group releases, and it's not too divergent at all. It is. I'm glad that you used the word confusing, because that was the impression that we had when we first started designing this. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, depends on how you define good, right? Cool. So yeah, that's I think everything from the. Do you want me to start filling this in?
Oh, I have a question around what you would want to select when you identified, I would like to create a release from the project's individual tags in this view. Would you possibly want to also select a single commit or a branch from that project to create a release from?
So that's a good question. It really depends on what kind of flow you're expecting here. Like I have to repeat my obligatory thing, which is if I go through the API, I'm most likely going to circumvent this whole process. So the API is important. But I would expect that each project within a structure would have, well, two options, right? Like they have a unified structure, which makes everything super easy, or they have their own separate structures, which is majority, like the case in majority of time. So if a project already had a release, I would probably go and select a release from it. So I would go and create from a certain project, and I would expect the release to be the first thing that is offered to me, because someone in that project already went through the trouble of creating a release. How that you would do that, that's, well, your problem. I don't know exactly how you would do it, but and if that is not an option, if the release is not something I'm looking for, because right, like I don't see it in the dropdown, it doesn't relate to the release I'm creating right now, I would probably go down the tag level to create from a specific SHA. It can be created from a branch, obviously, but I think I'm leaning more towards a specific SHA, because that kind of covers both a branch and a commit and right, like all of those things. So I think that would be like the thread I would be following.
So to repeat that back, you would want to, so you'd want to get the information, like say that this was a drop-down menu, select what you'd want to create from the projects, and you would rather see SHAs in that drop-down menu. That way you're able to associate.
Oh, in the drop-down menu, absolutely not a SHA, because that would be really confusing. For example,
right,
if you had like hundreds and hundreds of commits a day, you
won't filter it, right?
You won't filter it. But if I already didn't select a release, an existing release, and I have a possibility of creating a tag, I would probably pre-fill a tag and not expect a drop-down, probably expect me to fill in a specific SHA.
Okay. So supporting more of the SHA interaction. Okay, that's perfect. One workflow that I'm kind of flirting with right now is going to this page and looking at the most recent branch that's been, cut from master, and declaring that as part of a group release.
That could be a thing to do, but think about it this way from GitLab perspective, for example.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about GitLab org, a GitLab project, the moment we create a stable branch from master, stable branch is already out of date. And because of the amount of volume we have of changes, chances of someone's branch being already newer than the stable branch are very large. So if I were to go down that route, I would probably prefer to have a specific prefixes. So say, if you want to pre-populate this, you may be collecting the protected branches, right? Like there are protected branch rules. Master is protected, or main branch is protected, and probably some set of deployment branches or stable branches or backport branches, like something that is tied to that specific workflow. And selecting the most recent one from that set might actually make sense, because all the other ones are discardable. Like you can delete them at any point in time. They shouldn't persist.
Absolutely. All right, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
So I think circling back to the prototypes, Marin, can you tell us what will be your first action on the screen? So you can try to interact with the fields.
Yeah, probably the release title immediately. I would do something there. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's pretty much what I expected, right? Or a release dropdown. Now, okay, let me click it. Well, why am I on the milestones now? I mean, I only clicked one thing. I guess it's the prototype probably.
Yeah,
but
it's a prototype.
Yeah, okay. Is there a way to go back?
I think you with your arrow and
There we go.
Yeah.
No, the thing I'm confused about is, how do I know this is the latest one? Is this the fact that the release, is this because 13.1 is the latest release, or because 13.1 was created weeks ago or day ago or something like that and it's already out of date? So I don't know that information. How do I know this is the latest, and based on what would that be? Okay, let's use that. No, actually, let me use this as an example. I'm going to use this one. Wait, for which? So if you're telling me I need to create, use a milestone, my group milestone, but is this from a group or a subgroup? And which projects does this group contain? Because I'm not really sure, right? Like if I know the name of the group, if it's a subgroup 1, I might know all the projects below it, but I might not. And I don't know whether I need all of that or not, right? Like I just feels a bit confusing there. And then my project milestone. Is this my project milestone from a specific project that I just selected? Or is this a dropdown of multiple projects and their milestones? I'm assuming it is from the project I just clicked on.
Right.
Yeah.
But how will this change if I have 2 projects?
It'll populate all the projects that you have selected.
All of the projects. Okay.
Yeah. But that's a good point there. And I think in general, don't really do a good job in like step information or step process in the forms. And indeed, if the information depends on the previous form item, we should be more explicit about that.
All right. And yeah, I would probably expect, based on what I already clicked, I would probably expect to have, because I selected a release, I would expect this section to be already pre-filled for me. Even if it's only a title from that release, from the project I selected, and all of the text related to that release that I can then delete. it will become complicated the more items you add, but there is a way in Markdown to actually just hide that as a comment, so you can actually just remove the comments and say, you know, cherry pick what you actually want to show. I would like to see, for example, here, like I would see this as an ideal replacement, Jackie, by the way, it's ideal replacement for our old, like release notes all over the place that we have, like in the handbook, in project pages, like all of that. I think it GitLab or GitLab release notes that we currently put in there should probably roll up to the group and include all of the other components, because that is the release, actually, not only one project. And then I would probably just go and edit things around here to make it a bit prettier.
Tell me what you mean by different components.
So right now I selected only one project, right, and one release. So having that pre-populated might be useful, but it's probably more useful if I select multiple projects. All of them have their own releases that are already nice and pretty, and they are somehow added to this in a specific way, so that I can then go in and comment what I actually need from, or just remove parts that I don't need.
So specific to the release notes section, just auto-populating from
Highlights.
The contents of the release. Okay, perfect.
Exactly. Like
I have a question about assets later, and if you would expect to see assets. So I thought when you said components, you might be.
I absolutely expect assets here, but let's talk about the description for a bit. I can imagine myself, if I were to use the interface, I can imagine myself going and thinking about the items that I would like to highlight for each specific release as a draw-in. As in, if I go and remove, say this pajamas project I selected, it has 20-something release notes. While all of them might be important for the pajama people, there might not be all that important for my group to know. There might be one thing from that release note that I want to highlight and say, and leave that item in, like this is an important item there. For rest, link, right? Click link to go to the other release notes. And I would have, like if I have 10 projects, I would have a highlight from each of the project with the link to the full release notes for each project.
So to extract a little bit from this, you would like to have a way for the curated release notes that are on the project to further curate them at the group level. So this may mean that if the release notes at the project level are populated from, let's say, semantic release and use the Semver architecture, maybe you would want to be able to configure an option that says you only pull in features rather than bug fixes or whatever, like having a configuration option for that. Okay.
Yeah, like a filter, like a label filter we have everywhere would be an option. You know, you set certain set of labels and say filter on this one. I want to highlight, this is a bug fix release, for example, right? These are all the bugs we fixed. This is a security release, right? Like there are sometimes you have these mixed releases where you just want to highlight features, where you want to highlight these performance improvements with it. It really depends, but that option might be actually interesting to you.
Yeah, so it's really cool that you're saying this, because we do have an issue that we're looking at prioritizing about associating releases to labels, so that we would be able to more fine tune, like, oh, I want to see all the releases that have to do with a bug, you know, inside of GitLab, whatever. But we're also going down different release notes being generated from different components of GitLab. So instead of relying on commit messages, populating the release notes from issue descriptions, like a header, and then allowing that to suck in that particular issue's label. So then you can filter on the issue label. Would that be something that you could see being useful?
I actually would prefer that in, like, for example, for a big company, I would prefer that. So at GitLab, for example, right now, I used to have a lot of confidence that our commit messages were perfect because we had a smaller dedicated team that was very much focused on making everything tight and pretty, and was right like dedicated to the workflow. But with a big company like this, that dedicated workflow is confronted with many opinions that I may or might not agree with, which also means our history, commit history, is messier than it used to be. But the issues and merge request titles are probably more important. I would probably focus on merge requests rather than issues, because merge requests are the ones that are bringing in the code, unless you have a way to connect the merge request to issue and like say like, this merge request is rolling up to this issue and then we are going to use this, right? But it becomes complicated there. If you move one step further from getting the commit message, I would expect merge request to be the one that populates this.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, circling back to the prototype. Sorry, Hayana, we're going down all these soapboxes.
That's amazing. So Jack, you want to talk about assets further down this interview? Okay, cool. So then Marin, if you click, I'm not sure where you are now in prototype, so I can.
So save changes probably. I can't edit this, so yeah.
Yeah. So if you can tell us what you see on this view, what you understand from this prototype.
Whew. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused here. You did this on purpose to confuse me.
Give me options so you can critique them.
Wait, why? What confuses me is the my group release that I just created, and I selected a single release as far as I remember. Why do I have two more shown that are not the ones I selected? Is this a prototype thing or?
Yeah, it's in the prototype. So the first one is the one you created, and the second one would be one without a milestone. Yeah, the first one is the focus.
Okay, I get it now. I don't understand why I would have 0% complete there. Milestone issues, like all of that. I don't understand that information. Didn't I just create a release? That means things are completed. So it's 100% completed all the time because I created the release. The milestone might not be, but that's a different story. And what's going to happen at the end of the milestone, someone is going to come back, groom it, clear it out, close the milestone, and then it's going to be 100%. So did I just create a release out of an incomplete milestone? Maybe, yes. But that's very common.
Yeah, so this is where we're trying to piece together the plan versus delivery and create sort of a draft release. So if you were to say that
the draft,
I would have a draft release, I'm selecting this project release that's already been created. Maybe that release is complete, or maybe it's not, and your group release is now behind because your project release isn't actually done. But we don't have a signal of draft release in GitLab yet. So you're absolutely right that the initial inclination of having a not complete milestone with a release doesn't make much sense here, because we also only tag when we deploy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, not only when we deploy, we tag when we are ready to create a release, right? Like that is the final, right? Like that is the line in the sand for this specific milestone. So if that is the concept, then upcoming is very much confusing here, because what I would expect from the upcoming is I already created everything. The date is coming around. So when the date turns over from the due date that might be set for the release or the milestone, then it becomes an active, right? Like a valid release. Upcoming makes it feel like it doesn't click for me compared to what you just explained. Like it is something I already created, it's done. So the only thing I'm expecting next is that this upcoming is going to become the latest release available for the group. If someone goes down to a group level overview, I would expect to see the latest one, like the active one, and the upcoming one as a next thing. right? Like that is going to replace the current active one, because what do I do when I go to a group release? Well, most likely I want to get the latest release, or I want to find out what's coming, or I want to look at the archive. Those are like basically the three options I see when I go to the page. The second thing is clearer, because what I'm seeing here is collection of releases. And this makes me believe that this release is active. So it's finalized. And there is no loose ends there. The interface could do some work, but this is not what we are talking about here, I guess. And like the group release tree, like that's the same thing as the first one, just 0 or 100%. Like I think it's the same feedback. I don't necessarily know what I would do with that information.
So to get the biggest takeaway for me is maybe as the first MVC for this, we don't have the release progress view as a part of group releases until we can support draft releases. And that might be a little bit more explicit for our users, because today users are leveraging a project release. They create a release and then they have a milestone attached to it, and then they update the tag on that release once that's actually been delivered, because we don't really support this archetype of a draft release.
Yeah.
So I think once we can support the draft, this becomes a little bit clearer, because then you have draft and latest. Like I could see group release 1.2 being the latest release, and group release 1.3 being your upcoming release. And then once that 1.3 becomes the latest, 1.4 is upcoming, and everything in the release progress view in the archive will be 100%, because that's the reconciliation of this is what's contained in this release from that perspective. So that's super feedback there. Are we, Hannah, do you have any other questions on this view? Because I kind of want to poke at assets now.
Yeah, go ahead. I just have questions around the UI elements. Like maybe I'll just wrap up. There's anything that you think it's missing from this view, Marin?
Highlights.
Highlights
are missing because right now it's a very bland. Sorry, no offense, but it feels like a very bland set of tables. Nothing is drawing my attention apart from this upcoming, and I cannot get my eyes out of it. I would probably want to highlight with the latest release, although if you put it out in the top, then you highlighted it already. But then I would expect all the older ones to be highlighted a bit differently, right? Like toned down, like not white so much in my face, but like something different to just put them back in the background. Like my current release is what I'm looking for.
What do you think about collapsing archive releases or moving archive releases to a separate tab, which is up here, you have like upcoming and expired? What are your thoughts on the default view being only upcoming or latest releases and then archive or move to a separate tab?
Yeah, collapsing it one way, paginating it, like something like that. Just, you don't have to have it in your face. Like if you take a look at how packaging systems usually do things, top down, everything else is basically archived. Like you just go click an additional button because you're looking for something that is not what the project creator is expecting you to look at, right?
So what I would like to share with you from a group release perspective, we currently have our dog fooding of the releases page where it's populated from the release post. And what I would want to see in the future is that it's populated on the group page and we're able to view this sort of granularity of each of the projects that feed into this to help our sales and marketing team kind of navigate what's been released, what is upcoming. And that's where like the upcoming feature is most useful, especially being able to track like how are we progressing toward that due date of the 22nd. From an internal lens. So just wanted to share that with you.
I get that, but that is a completely different audience you're talking about here, right? Like if you're talking about the users of a set of projects or of this release, like I would come in to download an artifact and look at the release notes to do something with it, rather than look at the wish list of what we might deliver. If I want to do that, I would probably click something or zoom in or, you know, like highlight it in a different way. But the reason why I'm coming down to this page in most cases is to get something out of it rather than see the future.
The job to be done is very much about consuming what's available and building it. Yeah, got it. Okay.
Like I get why you would want to put upcoming first, but then it clashes with my understanding of a release. Release means it's released, it's ready to be consumed. So it feels like it's not there.
I don't have any. Well, you can go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, perfect. So since I think you already answered this question for me, but if you go to this group release page, being able to click into a specific asset or artifact for each of these sub projects from this view would be a useful feature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Like that would be the reason why I would come here.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Just wanted to validate that assumption.
Yeah.
What are your impressions of this feature? What do you think about it?
I'm actually excited if we are able to use it through the API, because it would allow us to do a couple of things that we're right now doing in a programmatical way, but from our release tools. We would be able to tag, and like if we have attachments as well, that would be outstanding, because that would allow us to do different things with it. We could attach release evidence for each and every one of these individually and have them roll up to this group level. Then we don't have to deal with additional pages that we have out there. The release notes or the change log notes, whatever you want to call them, like that all could be rolled up here. Like if we are able to, first of all, offer attachments and then also add arbitrary attachments to the release as an additional thing. So yes, you have the release artifacts, but you also have the additional things that you would like to bundle into a release, right? Like you generate release evidence automatically, but we have wider scope, for example. So I would like to generate a single release evidence file that I would like to attach here for everyone else to use. While it would be nice for it to be automatically done, I have some additional requirements with licensing and so on that I need to insert post release creation, and that would be interesting to offer out.
Oh, well, you just piqued my ears on release evidence. We'll have to have another call on that one, but because I would love to build out that feature for our dog fitting use case. Obviously, it's super minimal right now. We're just trying to like get stuff in it. So, but definitely interested in that. Well, that's encouraging. I felt like this was a really great call, and I don't feel like my feelings are hurt. So this is great.
Well, I'll call this day a success. I didn't hurt someone's feeling, because that's usually I have a counter for that, I guess.
Marin, I actually get offended when you think that you can offend my feelings with your feedback.
Oh, that's good. That's good.